Hello again, tribe. I want to read you something off of unr.edu, Nevada Today. And it describes, in brief, how the Holodomor happened, not just in Ukraine, but across Russia, Belarus, Moldova, Kazakhstan. 1 second, I got to sneeze. Excuse me, I'm not going to cut that out. I just don't have the time. But it's important to understand the machinations of how forced famines happen. And you can almost always trace them back to a communist takeover, much like what is happening in our country now. We don't have the open fighting yet, but we will have. But the laws, rules, regulations, the policies, the misunderstandings, the embellishments that come along, such as, oh, we can produce 1 million bushels. Oh, let's make it 1.2 million. Makes me look good because the region across over there only said 800,000. I'll look great and I'll get the promotion instead of them. The cronyism, the crap like that goes on. It's important to understand because that's what's happening here, and that's why we have difficulties here. Not the only reason, plenty of reasons why, but I want to read you a brief description of the progression of it, how it happened, because you can correlate those to things that are happening here in the United States today. So here's something, a preface, and then I'll get into the meat of it. Well, in 1933, 1934, I was a member of a commission sent out to inspect wells. We had to go to the country to see that the shafts of the wells were correctly installed. And there I saw such things as I had never seen before in my life. I saw villages that not only had no people, but not even any dogs and cats, because they'd eaten them. And I remember one particular incident. We came to one village, and I don't think I will ever forget this. I will always see this picture before me. We opened the door of this miserable hut, and there, the man was lying. The mother and child already lay dead, and the father had taken the piece of meat from between the legs of his son and had died just like that. The stench was terrific. We couldn't stand it. Ukrainian famine, 1932 and 1933. Hearing before the Committee on Foreign Relations of the United States Senate, August 1st, 1984. The hearing was about cannibalism. And there was a lot of that went on, not just in Ukraine or the famine of that period, but also in the Chinese famine. The Chinese famine, there are stories where families were trading children so that they weren't eating their own children. They would swap children with the neighbors and then consume them. Horrible, horrible things coming if we go into famine, if the government goes into communism and decides to use food as a weapon against the population so that the population will conform. Here, we'll continue on. This happened in Ukraine 90 years ago. I don't know why they call it the Ukraine. It's not the Ukraine, it's Ukraine. You don't say the Germany or the England. It's Ukraine, not the Ukraine. Okay, I'll stop. This happened in Ukraine 90 years ago. At the end of the 1920s, Ukraine was the granary of Europe and generated 70% of the cereal production of the USSR. Stalin pushed for compulsory collectivization, and collective farms increased from 7.4% in 1929 to 60% in 1930. Those who refused to collectivize their land were interned in camps or executed. In addition, the grain quotas imposed on the Ukraine were increased from 30% in 1930 to 41.5% in 1931 and up to 60% of total grain production in 1932. Contrary to what the 5-year plans predicted, collectivization produced in Ukraine a severe reduction in agricultural output, massive population growth in the urban population, and a marked reduction in the number of cattle, which only in the late 1950s began to approach the levels of 1928. Rather than accept the strategic failure of the collectivization policy, the Politburo chose to punish areas suspected of anti-Soviet sentiment. I got to stop here and say, does that not sound like these mothers that are going to school council board meetings and decrying how their children are being pumped full of filth and garbage and pornography? And because of this, they are being called terrorists officially by the FBI and investigated? Do you not see the correlation? If you do not, you need to wake up. Wake up. Where was I? Rather than accept a strategic failure of the collectivization policy, the Politburo chose to punish areas suspected of anti-Soviet sentiment. Just feeling anti-Soviet was against the law, and you were starved to death. I'll say that again. Just feeling, expressing or exhibiting feelings against the Soviet system, and they starved you to death in a time of plenty. Vyacheslav Molotov headed the Extraordinary Commission for the Delivery of Grain in Ukraine. The strategy was to implement extremely high production quotas followed by requisitions, fines, and provide insufficient supply of seeds through rationing systems. They have to create laws to make all this legal, then they do it to you. The end result was those people died of starvation. And it was all legal. On August 7th, 1932, the law of 3 spikes was enacted on the protection of state property to prevent the sale of agricultural material or the consumption of grain, with penalties ranging from 10 years in prison to the death penalty, 10 years in a gulag. See, you lived 10 years in a gulag. There were gulags up in Arkhangelsk area where the life expectancy of a young male was 17 days. And they went there by the tens and hundreds of thousands. 17 days. All of it was legal. Wake up. In 5 months, there were a minimum of 54,000 arrests and more than 2,000 executions. The law of August 1932 prohibited storing food in homes and extended requisitions. And in December 1932, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Ukraine decreed the withdrawal of the ration supply and the health care system. They took away your ration card and your access to health care. Wake up. These measures were accomplished by others, freezing the delivery of goods and credits, demanding the early repayment of financial obligations, a ban on trade, the removal of merchandise and livestock, and a ban on internal mobility through the issuance of safe conducts. The local commissar would never sign your document allowing you, your internal passport, allowing you to travel to another even town. Without being able to flee, most of the population was isolated in pockets of hunger. All stored grains from the summer of 1929 began to be transported out of Ukraine. When famine began to take its toll, a second wave of seed seizures was conducted in the fall, so that there would be nothing to eat in winter and nothing to plant in spring. This was done for 3 years. In 1932, 4.2 million tons of grain were seized. At the same time, the USSR's grain reserves exceeded 3 million tons, and almost 2 million tons of grain were exported to Western Europe. The result of all this was the famine from 29 to 33, that mainly affected Ukraine, Kuban, Moldova, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. The first reactions to food shortages were the disappearance of most livestock, followed by dogs, cats, and any other forms of animal life. The intake of herbs and roots produced numerous cases of food poisoning. Even those people didn't know what all they could and could not eat. You think you're going to be able to go off in the forest and live? Give me a break. With their parents dead, thousands of unprotected minors wandered through towns and cities in search of food. In numerous cases, desperate parents put their children, in some cases babies, on trains bound for cities, hoping someone would take care of them. Most died of cold or even thirst after spending days or weeks without being attended. In this context, the consumption of human flesh became a common occurrence. There were cases of bodies stolen from cemeteries, also cases of kidnapping and murder. As Timothy Snyder wrote in Bloodlands, at least 2,505 people were convicted of cannibalism between 32 and 33 in Ukraine. The lucky ones who were discovered eating human flesh were spontaneously beaten by the crowd. Some were burned alive. And it goes on to talk about much more of the cannibalism. But what I wanted to get, the point I wanted to get to here is that this was all done by government decrees. None of this was illegal. Going into someone's home and taking all their food right off the stove, out of the oven, taking your seed stock for the next year so you couldn't plant, all of this was legal. It can and it is happening here. It's not happening as quickly, but it is happening. You need to be prepared for that. You need to be prepared to take care of your family. Check on your preparedness plans. Are you in the path of what's coming? You might want to get out of the path. What's coming doesn't care if you're ready for it or not. It's just going to keep coming at ever increasing rates of speed and momentum. If the current Democratic ticket gets into the office, it's going to accelerate at breakneck speed. You and I will be, our jaws will be dropped in how fast these things are going to be implemented. And if you resist it, they're going to bring the system to bear on you. And it won't be fun and it won't be pretty. Get ready for it. Prepare. Go, go, go. Time is short. God bless you all. Bye.